just in case people forgot who he was. I'm not going to tell his actual alias, like who he used to be back when he was cool. Didn't have a life.
Indeed, many years ago, man.
So, okay, folks. I made my little funny video where I was watching the first part of the hangout where G-Man said he's never seen a tetrapod in his life, and like I had a lot of fun with that because I knew what G-Man kind of went. Like I know I'm reading what he's texting me. Okay, okay, what the hell? Oh God. Okay. Anyway, he's just now texting me back. I tried to throw G-Man a bone because I saw where he was going, because when he says things, he's not all that clear with what he means, and
Right.
it's okay. He doesn't take the time to see this. Like Reggie, I didn't. We had a similar incident a few weeks ago. I think actually it was last week, where he was talking about eukaryotes.
I saw some of that, yeah.
And so it was my impression that he was thinking that a eukaryote synonymous with microorganism. So it was like pulling teeth to kind of get him to see that, yes, there are some microorganisms that are eukaryotic, but there are also multicellular organisms that are eukaryotes. And so that process was just painful.
But you know what? I experienced this with my autism students. Once they think they have a concept, they kind of perseverate on that particular concept, and it's really hard to get them to see it from a completely different way. You have to kind of go in and help redefine or ask them a lot of Socratic questions, actually, is what helps. And I noticed there was too much teaching going on, and there wasn't much Socratic dialogue with him. I deal with people like him every single day, and I know it works. You have to ask them questions so that they can clarify their own thoughts. If you don't get them a chance to do that, then they really just aren't getting it. And like I would have said, so by definition, you are a human. You know what I mean? I said, so do you have a problem with that? He says, no. Well, why not? This is the definition. You don't have a problem with that, but you have a problem with tetrapod. Why? And you get them to explain those things. Anyway, but that's, hindsight's 2020. But that's kind of that's how I deal with students like that.
Well, Reggie, if you don't mind for a second. Well, hold on for a second, Barney. Well, just for those of you who aren't familiar with who Reggie is, would you give a brief background as far as your education and your professional background?
Well, sure. Well, for about 15 years, I was self-employed as a science communicator. I used to have a program called the Infidel Guy Show, and I left that program and decided to go ahead and just get my formal education. I was more of an autodidact before that. I think I really still am more of an autodidact. But I went on ahead and earned my degrees in human development, science communication, and I have, two master's degrees actually, and my second one is in biology, and I'm currently working on my PhD in public health. And I'm currently a science teacher, and I've taught marine biology, chemistry, a little bit of physics, physical science, and currently teaching astronomy and chemistry right now.
Damn.
Drake, let me just respond to something Reggie said. There's a hidden dynamic, Reggie, going on here. He thinks if he makes analytic a priori concessions like taxonomic definitions, he thinks that he's in effect making religious compromises. You get it? So he thinks he's compromising his faith if he acquiesces to just simple definitions.
Right, and that's why I wanted to emphasize to him that he could accept this like definitional thing that if you have 4 limbs, then you're a tetrapod. Like, without having to accept evolution, and I don't think he fully understood that. And I think maybe if he did, then he wouldn't have been so resistant.
Of course. I got that right away. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I play devil's advocate for G-Man, please?
I don't know why you'd want to, but go ahead.
Because otherwise we're all just going to agree indefinitely, and it's not going to be
circle jerk.
Yeah. So, at several points he said, well, yeah, there's a definition that it is things are alike, therefore they're in this category, right? We're tetrapods because we have 4 hands. He did explicitly say that. And he said, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking how are we related to this thing that I'm showing on the screen, which is basically, yeah, but I can charitably interpret that as there was a first tetrapod. There was a first set of animals that we would class as tetrapods.
No, I'm sorry.
Even though there
that's
isn't
not what
a
I saw.
species. What?
I'm sorry to interject, but that's just not what I saw. I mean, he was moving the goalpost. I mean, that's what I saw. I mean, that's what I heard and observed. There's a lot of that moving the goalpost. I really tried to do that. I tried to say, well, maybe he means this or maybe he means that. And he only did that much later. But you're right. But then he went right back to looking at the picture of the tetrapod. And I'm like, wait a minute. I thought you just kind of went on ahead and said that, okay, well, maybe that's a tetrapod, but how am I related to this? Right. And I heard that and I got that. But I was like, what are they like? Anyway.
He's not aware of what the tetrapod is.
But that's the big problem. Have a look at the title of his hangout. Because somebody read out the title.
Has anyone
of
ever
his
seen a
hangout.
tetrapod?
Right, okay.
Oh my
And he then picked up a cat.
Yeah.
Right, so he doesn't understand that the classification system isn't dependent on...
But he uses such scientific words.
Yeah, but scientific
this
is
the
not science.
That's the problem, guys. You made it far too complicated.
See, and that's why I think so too. And I kept saying that. I kept saying, guys, you're using big words. Just because he's using big words doesn't mean he can understand them in the right order, within the right context. You have to talk to people, in my experience, you have to talk to people like that in not a condescending way, but as if they're on fifth graders, and you're really trying to get them to teach you something. And you do so by asking them questions. When he starts to add, because he starts feeling like, oh, I'm in charge now, I'm going to answer these questions. When he begins to do that, you can then start showing him where his questions are not making, and his answers are not making sense. So, well, really? Okay, I didn't know that, but I thought you just said this and that. Oh, well, what it meant was so and so and so and so. Okay, well, which one is it? I mean, so I'm just sorry. As an educator, and as someone who's debated for almost 20 years, for me, that is just what is so effective, is using that Socratic method of argumentation, using that Socratic dialogue that gets most people, now there are some exceptions, to think. I don't think he's thinking. He's talking.
Well, the thing with G-Man is he's more of a wing and unanswered prayer kind of guy.
Yeah. He's not going to accept that humans are classified as tetrapods unless you show him that they are related to the very first tetrapod. Because he's totally got this mixed up in his head, and he doesn't understand that tetrapod,
Right,
four-limbed, like
so he's a lizard.
Like, let me finish. Like, tripod is three-limbed. Tetra means four. That's all it means.
Of course,
And
tetrapod.
until he grasps that, you're going to get nowhere.
So,
And if you make it too complicated,
Agreed.
he's not going to.
That's the
He is
first
not
thing I
going to
said.
get. You have got to get him to understand that cats are tetrapods, frogs are tetrapods, we are tetrapods, birds are tetrapods,
Wait a minute, what?
jackasses are tetrapods. And until he accepts that is all that term means. Because he is going to say, until you can show that I am related to the first tetrapod, then I'm not accepting that I'm a tetrapod. It's a definitional thing.
So I spoke to him just a little bit in his off-air hangout because I was trying to go in there and hopefully clear some stuff up, but he had just ended it. So he is actually watching this, and because I invited him to come and speak, and he declined. So he wanted me to be very fair and say that he did end up changing his mind halfway through and clarifying what he meant. So I wrote down what he had told me, and that what he was trying to get at is that he wants to know what transitional forms exist between the animal that he showed, which I'm guessing is some form of Tiktaalik, and human beings to this day.
But that doesn't really deal with the title of his hangout.
Yeah,
Moving the goalpost.
it does. Because so what I figured out from what little I spoke to him about, when he's saying tetrapod, he means Tiktaalik or some Tiktaalik-like creature. That's what he's trying to
say
reference.
that. Then he needs to say that. Because to say, has anyone ever seen a tetrapod, and then pick up his own damn cat.
I mean, here's the thing with G-Man that I've sort of noticed. Anytime he gains some new information or access to some new fact about the world, it's sort of like a mind-blowing thing for him, right?
Right.
Like it's some kind of challenge to his worldview. That's why anytime he comes into contact with that, he'll have to wrestle with it for I don't know how long before he actually accepts it on some level. So I mean, it's like it. I mean, how do you help someone like that?
You have to start small. You have got to start small.
Agreed.
You've got to start with what is a tetrapod and do not move on until that is grasped. Because until that is grasped, you can't go any further. Because, sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say, if I may, it reminds me of when he kept saying, what evidence is there that life came from the oceans, or that the first vertebrates or whatever he was saying came from the oceans or something like. I can't remember what he was saying, but it was something about how do we know life came from the oceans or something like that. And I was like, yeah, because the oldest fossils of creatures we have are in ancient seabeds. I mean, it's like, what are you talking about? And I didn't hear anyone really just say that. It's like, well, because the oldest stuff that biological stuff that we have found that can fossilize, we found in ancient seabeds. So I mean, what do you mean? So
But the point is, until he accepts that a human is a tetrapod, then he is not going to understand anything about evolutionary relationships with early tetrapods, is he? If he's going to keep insisting that we are not even tetrapods.
Fiona, how do you ask a question about something that you do not know?
Right.
Especially while you're being arrogant and cocky and sure of yourself.
I
right?
know.
So my point is that you're demanding that he first go and learn what it is, what the definitions are, so that he can pose the question in a proper way, so that he can be answered in a proper way.
No, I'm not. No,
Yeah,
I'm not. What
otherwise,
I'm saying
you have to do the principle of the charity and look behind the question and see what he's trying to find out. And if he's talking about the animal, then it doesn't matter what the definition of tetrapod is, and tetrapod is a meaningless word in that context.
Well, Barney is way too.
When the title of the hangout is "Has anyone ever seen a tetrapod?"
Yeah, I know.
Because at the start of that hangout, at the start of that hangout, he did not accept that tetrapods still exist.
Yeah, and by the end of it, he did.
Right, but I think that is the problem, that we've been on this blinking tetrapod thing for quite some time with him.
What? Oh, yes. It'll take 1,000,000 years then for him to get.
You can't get any further until he's grasped that part of it. And can I bring something else up while I remember? He asked the question about, are we related to a horse? Jade said yes. And then he said, show me the transitional form. Well, I've got an example here that might help him to understand this.
We can't play porn here, Fiona.
Unfortunately.
Here's the thing. G-Man is related to his cousin, isn't he? But he's not descended from his cousin.
Yeah, we know how.
And his cousin isn't descended from him. They share a common ancestor, i.e. the grandparents.
So a transitional form between.
So you will never find a transitional form between G-Man and his cousin, because although they're related, one isn't descended from the other.
Yeah, but you can show the two different lineages. You can show the transitional forms between the common ancestor and the human, and the common ancestor and the horse, and that's the path of transitional forms between the horse and the human.
I know that, but he was asking for the transitional form between the horse and the human.
But he does not know how to properly use the term transitional form.
Which is why I'm using the cousins example to show why there will not be a transitional between a horse and a human. Because you're not going to find that cousins are descended from each other. And I was wanting somebody to use that example to explain to him how you can be related but not descended from, because he seemed to be using the two of them interchangeably. As soon as you said something was related, he would demand a transitional.
Yeah, and that's what ended up getting me kicked from his hangout too. Is when I asked the follow-up question to him talking about the horses, was show me the transitional form between Coke and Pepsi.
Yeah, I knew he wouldn't get that at all when he said that, because he just.
That was not tactful on my part.
Well, he called it an ad hom.
He did. Well, no, he called the one before that an ad hom, which is when I said I was going to laugh if he did something that I thought he might do.
Well, I think we all have to concede that someone who can't pronounce the term "lols," let's be honest, is he gonna grasp a Latin-rooted word? I'm not trying to be mean here, but when I saw the title of that hangout, I was just like, well, and Drag, you can verify on Facebook. I was like, is there any hope? Like, honestly.
Like, I sent him a string of explanatives after that, because I sat and listened. I was like, I just can't. No, I'm not going to. Nope. And then I went back and listened anyway, because I'm like, well, maybe there's progress. And he started inviting people in. I was like, all right, here we go. And yeah, so I sent it to Reggie, because I was like, well, Reggie, you're a science educator. You have to hear stuff like this all the time, right? I think the first question I asked him is, how bad do you hate yourself tonight? Or something to that effect. I was like, what?
Good place to start.
Great comment in the live chat. Scott Spengler, cousins will only produce cousins.
That's great. But no, yeah.
Well,
that was even this hangout was even more painful to listen to than the Great Debate Community's science versus scientism hangout.
Oops,
I was like, oh man.
I could tell that one was going to be a hard one.
I wanted to bash my desk, my head against my desk. See, I wanted to physically pick up my desk and then bash it against my head.
I'm sorry.
Hey, if you do that, can you make sure that you do it live so that we can see you accomplish it?
I mean, G-Man is still stuck on his fucking Pokemon evolution. He expects a dog and cat to fuck, and that's a transitional form or whatever.
I think he's regressing, and I think that this whole tetrapod thing proves it pretty conclusively.
Although I do agree on one thing. I think we can find a homologous structure between a dude and a horse.
Indeed.
Like, I mean,
many.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a couple.
Yeah.
Well, so Jay, Jay, were you able to pry out any more information before you left off air? Because he was making some clarifications, and I wrote down just the one that he did say he switched his position, and he didn't want me just to come in here and call him dumb, which I haven't. I just kind of opened it up to what everyone else heard, because everyone else probably listened to more of it than I did. I really, like, today is not a good day for many reasons, but I just, my cup was full as far as the stuff that I could just stomach. But yeah, was there anything else, Jade? Any revelations that he had? Mic check, Jade. Bueller. Okay, Jade's having issues. All right, so
I'm back.
There we go.
Okay, there we go.
I had to close a bunch of stuff. So
yeah, so after I left, did he say anything else as far as clarifications? Because he did say that he changed his position on a few things.
you know, I started to ask him, and he left. I was going to ask him. I said, "Do you understand now what a tetrapod is? It's just something with 4 limbs." And I was going to ask him that. He left. He said he was tired. He had to go to bed, so he just left. But
did anybody check? Does he have a problem with being called a vertebrate?
That's what I was wondering.
I think he's taken issue with that before, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it was biped. I called him a biped. He flew into a rage.
Yeah.
I'm not even. I can't even make this up. I literally called him a biped, because I was trying to explain to him what a mammal was, and I said, well, I can't start with nipples, and that's another funny story. But I tried to start with something very basic as far as how we classify animals, and even though biped isn't like a taxonomic classification, I just wanted to use it as a soft example before I jumped into something more robust. And he instantly become just it's like instant. I can't even remember the fucking words.
Remind me of Ali G.
Indignant.
What, he got irate? He started tripping out or whatever?
Yeah, no, don't say that. No, he started. He became irate. Like, he really became irate, and I forgot there was a woman in the room, and she had to calm him down. She said, "Look, G-man, if you don't know what something is called, instead of getting upset, you could just ask." And so G-man said, "Well, you should tell Dragnot that just because he uses big words, he shouldn't just assume that I don't know what they mean, and he should be more patient." And I'm just like, okay, well, G-man. All that I said is that I can't. I couldn't, because it was another one of those days where I've had kind of enough. Like, it's just there's a point where you go, there's nothing I can say to jump over this barrier. There's literally nothing, and that had been my point. And so once she finally and calmly described what a biped is, he was like, "Oh, okay, that's all it is," because he instantly thought it was an insult of some sort without actually ever looking it up.
You need a white woman in the room always. You need a white woman in the room.
I think it was a white woman.
Well, I mean, that goes for everyone, though.
As an anthropological experiment, I do have a date with a preschool teacher on Sunday, so I can ask her how G-Man compares to a preschooler.
Hey, Dread, learn a couple things from her.
Dreadnought.
And yes, I've already sent you those pictures like a week ago before you asked.
Oh yeah. Oh, she's cute.
Dreadnought, you're a homo.
I am.
But just so you know, Barney, that sound is getting taken.
He said that Homo sapiens weren't humans at one point. I want to say he said that or something to that effect.
I don't know if I heard that exact thing, but he did object to the whole homo thing.
Yeah, no,
he objected to that definition.
He objected to Homo sapien being a classification of some. I'm trying to remember the exact context, but that's when I turned it off again. Because I was just like, I can't. And I had to refresh myself and talk to somebody else and get some more text messages asking me what the fuck, what's going on, and just, yeah, you should see my phone, because it was
blowing it up a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
When I said that I thought that a human was a member of the genus Homo, he didn't have a problem with that. I mean, he didn't agree with my definition, but he didn't have. I think he understands what homo means now.
Yeah. So next thing, we have to get him to realize what a hominid is.
Oh God.
Yes. That.
Good luck.
And I see someone was nice enough to put in the difference between Homo habilis and Homo erectus for me here, because I didn't know.
I think the position of the foramen magnum is a bit different between the two. Don't quote me on that, but I want to say that's a slight difference.
There are a lot of differences, like arm length, height, average height. There's some jaw structure issues, forehead issues that you know.
But Reggie, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't the main difference allometric cranial ontogeny, which is a fancy way of saying brain size, right? So isn't that how they classified each of the different stages, like from the Australopithecines to Homo habilis to Homo erectus, etc., and then before that the Ardipithecus? So my understanding was, reading books on hominid evolution, wasn't that the main criterion, is brain size, relative brain size?
In the past, but as you know, it seems like you do have, as a general trend, you do have this scaling of it occurring, although it does look like in some subspecies there might have been this kind of almost this reversal. But yes, I mean, Homo erectus for sure, we had a more human-like, of course, skull. And Homo habilis, of course, had a more shorter stature with the smaller head and the jaw structure a little forward, and slightly smaller brain, of course. So,
I think the problem we have, though, is that if you have someone who doesn't actually understand what something like tetrapod means, when they ask for the differences between certain Homo examples, and you try to then explain the differences, you're going to use technical terms. And he's objecting to technical terms. And he was complaining about using biological definitions. But in a conversation about biology, what other definitions do you use? Physics?
Fiona makes a great point. Like, I used to be a math teacher. This is part of this discussion was literally like looking at a four-sided polygon and arguing whether it's quadrilateral or not. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the number's even the same.
That when you start getting into details of things, and especially if you're familiar with the topic, it's very easy to slip in to the jargon that you would use when you're talking to a colleague.
Yep.
Yeah, and if he doesn't understand their jargon or has a different understanding of the jargon, you will start talking about different things.
Exactly, and that is why I was saying that until he'd grasped what tetrapod meant, then you couldn't really go any further.
Yeah, but if you're in a hangout with G-men trying to educate G-men, you're not talking about scientific terms. You're trying to transfer some of those terms to G-men.
Yes, but
you cannot demand that he know the term before you can talk to him.
No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that if you're explaining to him what the term means, you have to make sure that he's understood what you've told him.
Exactly, I agree with that.
Before you move on.
Yeah.
And so you can't get into all these morphological differences until you sort out the very basics. I mean, I've been in a conversation with somebody in a G+ thread who actually declared morphology has been debunked. And I said, what? What they think morphology is the theory that something morphs within its own lifetime.
Oh boy.
And even that's not falsified.
Right. Now, so basically, she thinks that morphology means Pokemon. And she equates this to the word evolution.
Well, that's insipid. I mean, that goes outside.
Yeah.
Right. But until I can get past this, I've got to be careful, because in trying to explain a paper which has been misunderstood, and we're talking about the morphology of the wrist in primates, I can't use the word morphology.
Mm-mm.
Because as soon as I say morphology, no, despite what I've already explained, that all it is the study of the structure and form, and it's nothing to do with morphing. And until that message gets across, I can't use the word morphology. When I say these authors did comparative morphology of certain wrist bones, I have got to say they looked at the features within the wrist bones of existing species. Can't use the word morphology.
Dear God, it's enough to make you want to beat somebody over the head with a dictionary.
And this is what I've been dealing with this evening. Trying to explain that morphology is not the theory that things morph within their lifetime. Now, this person wants them to morph before they die, because they think that is what evolution states. They really think that.
I follow that thread. It's hilarious.
Right, but you understand that you can't get into the intricacies if there are certain words that you can't use because they don't understand them. Yeah. Especially something as simple as morphology.
Yeah, again, I agree. Go ahead.
How much responsibility do we have as educators to find a language, find a form of speaking that will get to those people? Because that again is the same thing. Like when they try to present their idea, they're told, "Oh, you need to use more specific terms. You need to speak scientifically. What you're talking is just an idea. It's not a theory. It's a guess. It's not on the same level as." And we kind of put pressure on them to learn the scientific terms and learn the scientific language. And some of them actually try and learn 50 scientific words and then try to use those words to express what their idea is. Then we say, oh no, but you're using those words all wrong.
I mean, hey man, to answer your question, the way I look at it, let me use an example, right? Prometheus had a duty, right? He had a duty to protect humanity and, you know, give them knowledge. I mean, his big pet, I mean, you know, the humanity's reward was that they were enlightened and they could progress. Prometheus' reward, well, you know.
Yeah, I know, but with that attitude,
got eviscerated every fucking day by an eagle. So
I agree, but if that's the attitude, then do not go into G-Man's hangout. Do not interact with G-Man. If you're not willing to educate him in the language that he will understand, what's the point of interacting with him at all?
But
I guess lols. I mean, I just do it to fuck with them. I mean,
okay, that's one way.
But I think what's important though is that when they are using a term and you're using a term, and you're using it differently.
Absolutely.
Then so you have to sort that problem out.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to see? This person is taking their definition of the term morphology,
yes,
and they're applying that definition to a paper that they are reading. Now, the people who wrote the paper did not use morphology to mean what they think it means. But because of this problem they're having with the word, they are claiming the paper is saying things it is not saying.
Yeah, and
they
the way you have
completely misunderstanding it.
And the way you have formed it now is perfectly understandable and is the way you should do it. And then after that, accept whatever definition they're using to talk to them further and to go from that to some kind of understanding.
Yeah, well, up to a point. But if you're still going back to the same paper that is using that term in it, you can't just let them use their own definition to claim that what the writers of the paper
absolutely.
So you have to say to them, no. The definition that the authors will be using is this definition. Therefore, what they mean is, and not what you are claiming.
I agree
and
with
you can't let that slide. Because then, if you do, then they will never understand the paper that they're trying to use to support their own case.
I mean, can we just put them on a smallish bus and just have them learn this stuff at some point? Like, it doesn't have to be way too long. It'd be like a small vehicle where you can have all the resources to learn this stuff if possible.
Yeah, and I would also say if you want to get into the science of this and actually discuss the topics, then the onus is on them to learn something about it. If they want to debunk evolution, then they have to know what is meant by the term evolution. Because otherwise what they do is they go tilting at windmills. They knock down a straw man version of evolution, leaving evolution itself completely untouched.
To Fiona's point, I want to warn Drake. Have you noticed a pattern, Drake? He keeps saying that the only evidence he'll accept are transitional forms. And I don't know if you've noticed that, but be careful for your debate on Sunday, because he's literally trying to cut off your arms.
He's taken a page out of Ronnie's book, because Ronnie had a hangout. I think he's deleted it by now, of course. Where why would he, right? But he didn't want examples of evolution using genetics or using morphology. And so the video that I basically made was that if the two pieces of evidence that would lead me to believe that my parents would be the records, documentation showing that they are my parents, or the genetic evidence, then that evidence would also disprove the notion. So it made no sense to preclude stuff that is supposedly the evidence for it, since it didn't make any sense. But I think that is where G-Man kind of got this concept from, and that is absolutely ridiculous. And so if he wants to make the stipulation that he'll only accept certain types of evidence, so I'll grant it, with, I guess, with I'm trying to think of a nice way to phrase. I'm trying to be really nice, to be courteous, and this is hard.
I commend the effort.
I will grant it if and only if he explains why other pieces of evidence are invalid.
Can I just say, I've put a link in the side chat. It's an image which I think demonstrates beautifully why everything is a transitional form.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
There we go. This is neat.
That is a good illustration, Fiona.
It is that.
I'm bookmarking this. It's nice.
Yeah, where's the first red letter? I'm going to put it into the live chat as well.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
Yeah.
No, but here's the thing, right? G-Man, he's had conversations with like PhD level scientists on this subject, right? And he's never actually been able to grasp or have any comprehensive like understanding of evolutionary theory. I mean, at some point, like, do you blame all the teachers for the fact that the student does poorly in the subject, or look at the student?
Well, yes and no. I think there is a responsibility on us to attempt to de-jargonize what we are saying. But I also think that you can only take that so far. When it gets to the stage where you're actually having to avoid using a word like morphology, then I think you that's taking it a little bit too far, because it's a common word. It's not a controversial definition. So yes, we have to, as scientists, as educators, whatever. Yes, we have to try and de-jargonize things, and we have to keep it. And I don't mean this in a condescending way, but we have to keep it simple, and we have to do it in small steps, and that is why I was getting riled up when every time related was used, the transitional was being demanded, because that confusion there, until that is sorted out, with the cousins, again, there is no way forward.
Yeah.
You must sort that out. Because if you're teaching, what you're doing is you have to lay a foundation on which to then build. And it's a bit like Jenga. And if the bottom of it isn't solid, then everything above it just is tottering. And then the whole edifice will come crashing down. You've got to have that solid foundation. You have to build it up in layers. And each layer, you need to make sure there's a firm grasp of before you go on to the next one. Because otherwise, all you do is confuse someone. And especially if there's a load of jargon in it as well.
Yeah,
so yeah, we've got a responsibility there.
And it's not a responsibility to G-Man. It's a responsibility to ourselves as educators. It's finding better ways.
Oh no. Barney's no longer with us.
He
I thought that was me.
So often. That's not a huge deal. But so the biggest challenge is going to be for me is I have a hangout that I'm going to be in with Rational Mind tomorrow morning, and we're going to go over my PowerPoint, because I think I mentioned this on Facebook, Reggie, that I have a debate with our good friend G-Man, the guy we just watched, and
all right.
So we're going to discuss whether macroevolution is science or not, because he is under the impression that it is not science. A few questions may come to mind, that like how has he made himself the arbiter of what is science? Can he really define science? And what the fuck, bro, may come to mind.
Yeah.
But I am going into this with the express purpose of explaining what's considered macroevolution to the best of my ability. I'm going to try and address as many, points that are germane to the conversation as I can, and not go into other topics, because he has a tendency to get into abiogenesis and to all other topics that are on the periphery, just because that's just he views this topic as sort of a thorn in the side of true believers. So if he can make as many connections as he can, he feels that strengthens his point, and he doesn't understand that going into another field that is somewhat related but not directly related is relevant to his point, and you can't really like disabuse him from that notion. So that's going to be really, really the toughest part. But one of the things that I am going to flesh out a bit more is this connection, these inferences that we draw from science when we don't have, the best DNA evidence, because of course, there is a certain point where DNA does degrade after a certain time period.
Don't tell him that.
I'm not getting into the DNA model. I'm not even. I'll explain that to him later, and we can laugh. But I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a key point, though, that you brought up, is you've got to disabuse him of the notion that accepting science for what it really is and what it really says necessarily means you have to throw out Christianity.
It doesn't.
Because, for like G-Man, Ronnie et al., they're inseparable in their minds. And they honestly don't understand how somebody can understand and accept and believe evolutionary theory and still remain a Christian.
Like it is tons of people who reconcile their faith with science, and how they do it is not up to me. I don't get into that. As long as they accept the science for what it is and they're still skeptical about it, then I'm perfectly fine. But we see in this case, it's not a genuine skepticism. It is they need a particular conclusion to be true in order for them to make sense of their religious beliefs, and that's all that it is. They're not coming from this from a standpoint of, well, here's what it says in academia. Here's how it's taught in academia. Here's what it says in the literature. Let me address it. Because one, it doesn't make sense, which is fair, is a very fair point that something doesn't make sense to them. But it is, well, this is not science because they've now taken these conclusions into the realm of whoever and whatever, and you can't do that. When in reality, we draw inferences in science all the time, and we use it to put people in jail forever, actually.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm getting at is I don't think he's ever going to understand until he understands that one can be a scientist and a Christian at the same time.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. I'm not going to even try and go there because I think that's a bit beyond him right now. You trying to say something, Reggie?
Yeah, I was going to make mention, and I'm glad you brought that up about the using evidence in court. For me, I've noticed that is a really good argument against those who try to make this a huge distinction as far as the evidence or the strength of evidence as far as macroevolution and microevolution. I like to tell them that, and I can understand that, right? I mean, we see many more instances of microevolution, obviously, because they're easier to see. They're observable within just a few generations versus something that's macroevolution. So I get that. But just like you, I love to make sure, and it's a really powerful argument of mine when I start talking about forensic science. And I asked them, should we throw out the entire field of forensic science then, based on your logic? And that, for me, that really helps. They really do quickly realize, oh my gosh, right, we're accumulating evidence, and it's the preponderance of evidence that we have to use to draw logical and rational conclusions, and that's what we're doing. And I'm sorry, I can't help that the evidence points in that direction. And then I go into the many Christians as well. For instance, if that's their hang up, like Kent Miller and these others who accept it just fine, and they have to because the preponderance of the evidence, not because of any theological conflicts.
Yeah, you actually hit on one of the questions that I'm going to ask him, because he can either accept the genetic evidence that we have, or he can just say, every paternity test, every, forensic science examination that's done is now invalid. And there's a lot of people in jail that need to be released because, based on the conclusion that he's drawing. And so I know a common retort is, well, what does that have to do with bones? Well, there's an entire body farm dedicated to examining the decomposed, cadavers of people and teaching, potential forensic, I think this a particular forensic anatomists, I think they're called, trying to figure out if this is even human. Because you'll have partial remains oftentimes. And so you have to pay attention to the minute details of, the humerus or femur or, a certain iliac crest to see whether it's a male or female. And, just looking at bones takes a lot more than having a picture on the screen. And I don't think there's a real appreciation for what these people do, because I hear so many opponents to this speak of it as if you're just putting together a jigsaw puzzle, and that's the furthest from the truth that there is.
It's interesting that you brought that up, because all of the fuss over so-called Nebraska Man. And yet most people who bring that up have never bothered to look at the actual papers or reports. They aren't really papers in the journal Science, and they're available to everyone. When that came up, they found this tooth, and what was really exciting about it is that it matched teeth that had recently been found in Java, or at least as best they could, because back in those days, people weren't sending photographs back and forth; they were doing drawings and making measurements. So that they thought that was really, really exciting. And later, though, when they retracted that, said nope. Turns out it's a peccary, which is a type of pig, peccary tooth. In that particular article, it's really cool because they explain why they thought that tooth was a human tooth. But what I was going to bring up is I have a textbook on forensic science. And in that textbook on forensic science, it goes into that very same thing. It explains to the forensic science students that when you're looking at teeth, you have to be careful because human molars look like pig teeth.
Now that is interesting.
Mm-hmm. I think I could probably actually take a screenshot of that and send it to you if you're interested.
Oh, sure.
It's also the only part of the body that pig won't eat.
Well, what's interesting? Go ahead.
I was going to say we're both omnivores, and pigs and humans are roughly the same size. I say roughly. It depends on the individual size of the human. Humans vary a lot in size. I mean, we have Fiona here, for example, and we have Drag here. There's quite a bit of difference in size.
I think I'm currently bigger than a pig.
Yeah,
I'm on a diet again.
I think I beat you by a couple 100 pounds.
Right. It depends on again on the pig species and how, but because we are omnivores, the molars, and because we're roughly, or at least our heads are roughly the same size, maybe not the entire body. When you look at a molar, they look exactly alike. The other teeth don't look exactly alike, just the molar. But yeah, I'll see if I'll make a note to myself to try to take a screenshot of that and send it to you. I think you can find it interesting.
Because I do plan on making one connection with forensic analysis, as far as that goes, to kind of illustrate that an untrained eye can't tell the difference between structures. And that actually, I was thinking about doing that. And so, Jay, if you can send me that picture, I can make the slide that I was thinking about doing earlier. But a little bit on that note, I think that what I'm going to do to help better illustrate the inferences that we draw in science is that briefly, very, very briefly, bring up just basic cell theory, and that we know that we had to come from somewhere. And so since we have a cell theory that's very well established, from the inferences that we can draw from there, we know that there's a predecessor at some point. So that the inferences that we draw based on the hominid species that we end up finding, based on the inferences from cell theory, kind of all coalesce into, okay, here is the history, the annals of what we now know to be, all existing or all extant hominids. Here are the extinct hominids from which they came.
Did anybody try to explain to these people that if they're right, if what they're saying is true, and if science is what science is, that science will actually vindicate them and prove them right, and
yes,
eventually.
Yes.
You could also ask
all
him how
this,
we used inferences to crack the safe.
yeah, all of that's been explained. I think because we're going to run into trouble with that one, is that let's just for a moment imagine a situation where science proved them right. Although science doesn't prove anything, but let's just say that.
I know.
They've sat and badmouthed science and how terrible it is and all the rest of it for so long that they'll have shot themselves in the foot. Because, of course, science is the devil's work.
Yeah,
That's a problem.
I can't disabuse them of that notion, because there, with G-Man and a few others comes that whole conspiracy of, well, scientists are just using big words to keep people like us out of science. Well, no, excuse me, that was Tommy Hall said that. G-Man was more of, there are scientists and they're trying to keep people out of science, and specifically young Earth creationists, because they'll expose the lies and so on and so forth. And actually, that's a little bit of Tommy Hall too. I'm not. They share that weird belief. But,
I mean, it can be any word he doesn't understand at the moment. I said correlation, not causation to him one time. Those were big words, so it's like,
yeah. Well, Tommy complained that he had a look at my thesis, and he complained that I had used big words than that.
these motherfuckers need to learn not to quit their day job. They gotta not go above their pay grade.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues, and this is true for Tommy, for G-Man, for True, for all these guys, they try to attack science. Well, I say attack. They try to utilize science. They try to learn science from a top-down viewpoint, and you can't do that. You cannot start from the top. You can't start with negligible senescence and then work your way down to cell theory. It doesn't work that way. It builds on top of itself. That's why before I go into my cell culture class that I'll eventually be in, I have to go through right now chemistry 2, organic chemistry 1, organic chemistry 2, biochemistry 1. Once I complete biochemistry, then I can go to tissue culture, and I've already spoken to the instructor, the only instructor that teaches that here, and so he wants me in his class. But I can't just jump in his class and say, oh yeah, I know how to do this, I know how to do all this, and then get in there and just completely fuck up, some HeLa cells. Even though they're a dime a dozen now, that's still a waste of resources going towards someone who's untrained and unlearned in this topic.
Didn't G-Man say one time that GMOs somehow alter our DNA? Like somehow?
He's big on that.
I wanted to say something about the language thing. I was recently watching a television series, and I can't remember the name of it. Sorry about that. But in it, this FBI guy goes undercover as an engineer at this corporation that makes a specific thing. It's some sort of structure. I can't remember what it is. That's not the point. But he goes to give this speech on this structure and how it's built, and in front of this whole audience. And I swear to God, I didn't understand 2 words of it. It was all technical jargon. It was all engineering stuff. My dad was an engineer in a completely different field. And as a matter of fact, he was an aerospace engineer. He was a specialist in electrical connectors. And I bet if you were to sit my dad down, if he were alive, and have him listen to that particular speech on a different kind of engineering, he wouldn't have a clue. Well, he might get a couple of words because he, did study engineering. But when you're talking about language, there is specific language for specific reasons. A while back, I read about some architecture because I was interested in, Frank Lloyd Wright. There's a whole bunch of terms that you have to learn to understand architecture. Engineering is just filled with complicated, specific things to describe all the different parts of a structure. So it's not that people are, if people are trying to hide things, well, I guess engineers are probably at the top of the list as far as I can tell. It's just that you have language that's specific for certain reasons.
I think if Jade's done talking, I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, cool. I think the thing that's paramount in the discussion is science literacy, and basically just having that understanding of the scientific method, its principles, how the laws of physics work, how these sort of things are sort of made, like in terms of theories and models, and generate accurate predictions and shit like that. If you don't have some level of dedication and discipline to having that understanding, at least on a fundamental level, you're never going to get any of the scientific concepts you want to espouse on. And that's the problem with the clown car posse. They're not dedicated to that. They think they're autodidacts with the capacity to read a little bit and then become experts almost instantly. That's not how it works.
I will say, let me take some time apart from the conversation, or the direction of the conversation, say that I think G-Man is trying to make an effort. I think because in the past, we've kind of seen him just go off the rails instantly and tell everyone what their position is and tell everyone what he thinks is the case, and then when you try and correct him, he flies off the rails. So I think now that he's actually inviting people in to hang out and practicing a little bit of patience, I want to try and give him some credit for that, because I do notice that is a change, and I would be remiss if I did not mention that.
Yeah. Actually, what happened today?
I feel like not to cut you off, Brian. I feel like he'd do way better. I mean, if he was actually sincere and not like, and I have this weird fucking WWE competence of being able to pwn evolution or whatever.
That's just a part of who he is. Like I've kind of accepted that. I thought some of that would go away when I met him in person. That's just who he is. And I mean, to me, it's just kind of like, well, it's an annoying aspect, but it's kind of like that person who's a little bit too touchy-feely with you, but that's just kind of who they are, and you have to kind of keep them at arm's length. But that's sadly something I can deal with. That, like, I can really deal with the WWE personality and being somewhat competitive. But for me, and this is what I talked about in my my broadcast earlier this week, is that when he says he wants to learn, he has to put forth the effort, because he wants to talk to scientist Sam, he wants to talk to Rational Mind and CRISPR. But mind you, these folks have years on me of education. They have many, many years. He wants to talk to, Fiona and Jade when, Fiona has had the formal education. She's been done with that. Jade is self-taught and still teaching herself. So even then, has years and years of experience of studying this stuff on her own. So when you come to somebody else looking for information, some humility is needed. And I think that's just not something he's used to. And so, the only reason I say it is because when Sam relayed to me that he didn't want anything to do with G-Man because it'd be a waste of his time, G-Man was genuinely upset about that, because quite frankly, Sam told him, "You're not worth my time." And so I think just that in his mind was just so hard to kind of reconcile, that it showed me that he thinks that he deserves people's time no matter where they're at, when in reality that has to be earned. Like, if I want an audience with the chair of the biology department, that guy didn't have to fucking see me at any given time. The president of the college didn't have to see me. My mother didn't have to see me. I have to earn that. And so I think that's something that he has to just change his whole, thinking processes in order to really get that to sink in.
I mean, I remember his video, right? Like, he said that, he said something along the lines of like, what conversations that we earn are worth or whatever. And it's like, I mean, like Jade bringing up her position as a Christian humanist and bringing up the whole notion of there's a part in history that had an influence with religious humanism. That's not like when you look at the historical works, I mean, that's not a very controversial statement, right? Instead of him sitting down and learning about it, he fucking loses his shit and apparently calls her idiotic for noting that there is such a thing as religious humanism. It's bizarre. Like, anytime he learns something new that's contrary to what he thinks he already knows, he just becomes an ass at that point. And it's a weird thing, and it's kind of a deterrent to learning. So I mean, one would think that he would at least try to tone that shit down just for the sake of humility. But I think that's a lost cause with that kind of personality.
Possibly.
It may be. I don't know.
I think he can get there over time. Like, today he will learn the term tetrapods, and yesterday he learned the term eukaryote, and every time he realizes that his preconceived conception was misguided or wrong or everything, he's one step forward to breaking the Dunning-Kruger effect and realizing that there is more stuff to be learned.
I mean,
no. You never break the Dunning-Kruger effect.
You do. Everybody
you
suffers.
Shift the curve, but you never break it.
No, everybody suffers from the Dunning-Kruger effect, and everybody suffers from the imposter syndrome.
False.
Well,
I'll speak for yourself.
I said it now.
Well, the interesting thing is that I can get, if he learns by making mistakes, I got that. I completely understand it because I am one of those people. Like if I make a mistake, you'll rarely hear me fuss and fight about it. Like unless I really think that I'm right, but even then it's not worth it. So I would rather take the time to be corrected because I get a chance to learn something. That's how I look at it. But then again, I don't really have much shame, so that probably has something to do with that. But so if he wants to learn, he may have to change some things about his personality in order to allow himself to learn more, because this process of pulling teeth when he misuses a term just takes conversations into a whole new direction. But one of his critiques of the hangout that he wanted the other night on my channel, where he wanted to talk about gods and, does a god exist? Well, we have to first define what a god is, and that process right there took forever because he again was misusing a term, and rather than going, you know what, I'll just explain to you the concept and just roll with me on that, he wanted to squabble about something that someone had brought up in Webster Dictionary within 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So,
No.
go ahead, Reggie. You want a last word before you head out?
Well, not really, but I must say this was a pleasure, and I'm really glad to get an opportunity to hear a lot of the different voices here. I think, and I appreciate you inviting me in. I think this is going to pretty much help up my IQ a bit, because I don't get an opportunity to really have these kinds of discussions very often, especially with my colleagues, obviously.
It's like that.
And so, and even, I mean, that's really it. It's just me for the most part. I'm the science department head, so I'm the one pretty much, telling everybody else things. So this is really, really cool to be able to hear this. It's just been a while. I think I'm kind of getting that itch to get back into it again. It's been too long, I think.
Yeah, as nerds get around.
Yeah, just let me know what your schedule is like, and because the guy that was in here earlier, Sam the Scientist, and I want to do a journal club where we go over some papers that just been released, and I'll send you the link to the other one that we did last week. We didn't do one this week, but maybe we can get you in on that. Should your schedule.
We shall see. But yeah, so you just comb over what kind of newly released articles. What is the topic, or what kind of background? I mean.
The one we did, the week before was on some new evidence for abiogenesis. The one before that was for, actually, let me see, it was a little while.
So it's biology related.
Yeah, they will be biology related. We kind of made the mistake of going out of the wheelhouse a bit with the biochem one, but they will be, strictly biology related. And yeah, the one that we did the other day was, I can tell you, it's evolutionary conserved principles predict 3D chromatin organization.
Interesting.
Yep, I'll send you a link on Facebook right now to it.
Huh. And they did with computer modeling. Is that how they?
Yeah. Oh, there's tons of graphs. At least 20-something graphs, I want to say, that showed where Sam would be better explaining this. They use high C and chip C, so you get to see the contrast between. I think they used Drosophila and the fucking plant, elegans.
Yeah,
C. elegans. C. elegans. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the elegant worm.
Yeah.
I hate it. I absolutely hate it.
Huh. Okay. All right. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Count me in a look at it. That'd be interesting. Hopefully, if I have time, like I said, I don't know. I'm trying to find a different job, to be honest, because I love teaching, but it takes up so much of my time, to be honest with you. I'd rather be doing more research, and getting a chance to relax and do some stuff like this periodically as well.
Okay.
Why would you say such a thing on a live stream?
Teachers are overworked, for sure.
But no, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot to. Again, I love it. I mean, like I said, I love teaching. I love my students, but I'm poor, and I just I need a little bit more time for me. So.
I always felt that undergrads made my life a misery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been fighting for a while now to get an adjunct professor position, if not a full professor position at like a community college, and just nothing's happening. So that's been a bit of a drag as well. So
my first love is lab work.
Yeah,
it's just just wind me up, point me in the direction of a lab, and let me go. That is my idea of having just been messing about in the lab, finding out new things.
Blowing stuff up. Not just kidding.
No, I didn't blow anything up. I electrocuted
a
a few things and radiated a few things, and poisoned a few things.
Just a few.
I didn't blow anything up.
Interesting. We're talking about radiation right now in my chemistry class, which is quite exciting.
I don't know if lysing your cells counts as blowing things up.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Maybe.
But yeah, you would just be getting to the really interesting bit when an undergraduate would sort of appear over the horizon very shyly and say, "What's a microliter?"
Oh, God.
Get the hell out the lab right now. Get the hell out.
Yeah.
Do I need
Tell me
gloves?
that's not real.
Some of them
No.
are great, but I used to end up saying to them, "Right, you lot, if you're prepared to give up your lunch hour, I will do a dilutions masterclass and sort out this dilution problem for you." Because I was sick of being asked the same question again and again and again and again.
Oh, that's right.
But the thing was, surprisingly,
Be very patient. I had to be very patient.
you would get quite a good turnout. They would give up their lunch break for a dilutions masterclass.
I wouldn't do that. All right, so I'll see you guys later.
Take care, Reggie.
I'll see you around.
Take care.
Bye.
I think people like G-Man, True Empiricism, and these other individuals, I think they're sort of victims of this alt fact phenomenon.
Yep.
You know, like I mean, I know alt fact like it's a recent coined term, but I feel like this sort of phenomenon. I mean, it's been going on in like the States for like decades. You know, I really feel like it just stems from a lack of like concrete education, just like being informed at a young age, and just having biases build up, you know, be it from your family, friends, vice versa, not vice versa, etc. And you know, they tend to read things that sort of like reinforce their beliefs, regardless of whether or not it's true, and that's sort of what you see as a result of that. It's hard to actually, you know, rewire that sort of programming.
Yeah, and
a question for the panel. Is D News a relevant scientific source?
Lacey Green was a host on the show, so yeah, it's a scientific show.
Yeah, it's automatically validated. Oh,
yeah.
How was that question not answered correctly?
Well, because Lacey Green was a host on the show, and therefore it is answered correctly.
Yeah, and given what I know about your politics, Barney, I'm pretty sure you like Lacey Green, right?
I do, yeah. He's okay.
Yeah. Well, but Jade, did Jade seriously just leave? Damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to bring something up, and I guess I'll just bring it up now because G-Man. Oh,
he's
good,
back.
Jade, you're back. I was just about to say the thing. So when G-Man kept Googling tetrapod in Google image search and he kept returning similar images, one of them that he found was this, and he was actually pressing you, Jade, at one point on, is this a tetrapod or not?
You've got it skewed all over the place.
Oh, yeah? Do I?
Cut the head off. You've ruined the joke.
Did I?
Yeah.
Well, what joke do you think I was setting up?
Whatever you were setting up, you've ruined it.
No, this wasn't a joke. This wasn't a joke.
Well, no.
Oh no, he was asking if this was a tetrapod.
Yeah, no,
and
yes,
it's a trailer logo.
Is the picture that is at the lane.
Yeah.
And it brought up this illustration. I'm correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, that's just an illustration. And I had no idea what it was an illustration. I can't tell if it's a thing or not because people use illustrations for all sorts of things. They use cartoons. They use it for this. Look at this. It's a tetrapod, right? Just a sort of a...
It's a trailer that flips into a boat.
I couldn't tell if it's... yeah, so if it... That's what I did. I was suspicious of the picture. And so I would say, if that's a real creature, then yes, the tetrapod.
I mean,
and yes, I'm related to it, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I think what Gmail was trying to get at is what he kept saying. Is that a tetrapod? Is that a tetrapod? Was he was looking for Tiktaalik?
Basically, like he has.
But he didn't have a name for it. He didn't know what it was called. He just knew there was this thing.
Yeah. I mean, he does that with the Uri experiment, for example.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, it's hard to understand what G-Man is trying to say when we can't ask him the proper questions. I mean, it's kind of fucked up. I think these questions can never be addressed. They can't be asked, initially.
Yeah. And you don't know the definitions.
I think that's the problem. If you don't know the definitions, but you're not prepared to accept what you're told the definition is.
Oh, he knows the definitions. You're the one who doesn't know the definitions.
If you're pointing out this is the definition that science uses, and therefore in a scientific paper this is what that word then means, then they want to say no, and make up their own definition. And then insist that that's what the writers of the paper meant. There's a problem there.
Yeah, I caught on to that, and I'm just like, what? Like, I couldn't. There's not a good way to respond to that because now he's now inserted this kind of conspiratorial thing into the conversation when it's like there's a simpler answer. There's a very, very simple answer. You didn't understand it in the first place, and then someone corrected you. It's not just someone snuck in this definition when you had your eyes closed or when you blinked.
Exactly. Exactly.
I never understood that.
Yeah.
One of the things that really got me when he left the room, this is around the whole Jade and Christian humanism thing. He said everyone else was off topic, but he was the only one that was remaining on topic. And I thought to myself, motherfucker, if everyone else is conversing with no contradictions in their speech, and you're the only one who's focused on the topic. Don't you think that role is kind of reversed? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, he tends to have the perception far too often that he's the only one in the room.
No, he generally is.
Oh, well, that's true.
Yeah,
let's teach him solipsism.
Yeah, that's some medicine shit right there.
Well, I've tried my best to communicate to him through some of my videos, even though I'm, admittedly, been a bit smug using Scott Gerritsen's language there. Just a little smug, and just explain like, okay, maybe you don't understand this stuff. There's not a nice way to say that. There's just not a nice way to say. There's stuff that you're trying to figure out, and the way that you're going about doing it is not the most effective way. And so some of us who are kind of more familiar with these things can spot where you're going wrong and instantly point it out. But the assumption is made on your part that when you read it, you understood it, which did not happen. It's just like, but this is a perfect example. Every time he said at the beginning, tetrapod, what he was referring to specifically was a Tiktaalik-like creature.
Yeah.
And so while a Tiktaalik is a tetrapod, yeah, that's not what the context revolved around. And so there's a lot of crosstalk, and so now you have to go back, just pull some teeth for an hour and a half, explain to him that what he's trying to refer to is not what he thinks it is. And
I'll put it this way: you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, I was just about to pull up.
There we go. Nice.
That's why I was emphasizing that you have got to make sure that each step is clear before you move on to the next one. You can't teach unless you actually take the time to do that. I mean, if you've got some teaching experience, then you become familiar with certain misunderstandings that arise. You'll maybe find that there's a misunderstanding shared by a number of students, or a misunderstanding that pops up every year. And you realise that now you've got to guard against that misunderstanding. Because it's much easier to make sure that the misunderstanding never arises than to try and undo a misunderstanding.
And that's something that I think that I need to work on, because my own mother, she just overtly told me that I was too arrogant to teach anyone. And so I wanted to prove her wrong. So that's why I started tutoring, actually. So I think I rested upon the laurels of my accomplishments as far as me being a stellar tutor, in that it's a different dynamic. It is a completely different dynamic where people who don't understand a topic know that they can come to me and lean on my understanding in order for them to better understand the topic, wherein this is something that's almost ass backwards, where you have someone who thinks that they understand it, and then you kind of come to them, and when you're discussing it, they aren't reliant upon your knowledge. They're reliant upon what they simply think, even though they know that they possess less knowledge than the person who's talking to them. So it's a weird, just really, really weird scenario that perhaps I and many others need more experience dealing with.
I mean, this is a guy that thinks his pets have the capacity to be slaves. I mean, it's fucking. I don't know how you could work with that.
You have to tackle one thing at a time. Like, I think that's just the best thing to do, is tackle it one topic at a time. And it's kind of something that that Hannah had told me, is that you can't really go all out, and every time he says something just off the wall, just address it. You have to kind of pick and choose. Well, what's important to this? What's the big issue that we need to address, and that we just kind of have to skip over all the little minor mistakes. But then if one of those minor mistakes is the linchpin for him to understand the larger concept, then you're going to spend all day, because he's claiming that he wants to learn, but he's resistant to making the minor correction that he needs in order to get to that next step.
Yeah. I mean, that's why he doesn't fare quite as well in some of those bigger rooms where it's like the room's full and there's 9 people, because some of the things that he says are so, like, you know how people were saying that Ted Cruz has a punchable face? He has like a pounceable, like, something, I don't know, like, it's so easy to want to pounce on him when he gets in the room. And so he can feel attacked by a bunch of different angles, and that's just not productive. So it sucks that he so often, whenever he chooses to go into one of these other rooms, finds himself in that situation.
But I think part of that is that he goes all out to do that anyway in those rooms.
Yeah.
The term that was coined for it was hangout vandalism.
Yeah.
Where he goes in to deliberately ruin a hangout. There is an example of that. I may have part of it on my channel, where he vandalised Keefe's hangout. And I mean, it was just tearing down the hangout.
Yep.
Because he comes in already all riled up. Adrenaline level turned up to 11. And you're not going to get anywhere at all. It doesn't matter how calm you are.
That's not true. We did get somewhere today.
Yes,
we did ultimately recognize what a quadruped is.
Well, we'll see. We will see. I hope he does.
I do too.
It's an easy enough concept that I think he could actually get it.
Yeah. But what he needs to now do is get the concept that saying that humans are tetrapods and cats are tetrapods is a classification thing. So even if evolution wasn't true, humans would still be tetrapods and cats would still be tetrapods. He's got to grasp that. This is a classification thing. And he also has to grasp that being related to something doesn't mean descended from. These are really fundamental misunderstandings that he's got. And until he grasps that.
But also he didn't get an answer. Sorry, I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. On you go.
But also he didn't get the answer to the question he was trying to ask, however wrongly put. And we need to somehow find a way to explain to him why he cannot get the answer to that question. Why it would take 4 years of college to understand it empirically, or that you really do have to accept that other people have looked into it. And yes, we are related to the first tetrapod.
Yeah. But you see, that would be dismissed as just argument from authority.
I know. But
you can't show the evidence if he doesn't understand the terms. So,
G-Man, if you wait, G-Man, if you're watching this, G-Man, if you're watching this, if you need somebody to talk to you and not challenge you on everything you define, I'm available. I'm willing to talk to you on your terms as much as is needed and try to go through enough steps that you see that not all steps can be done in one sitting, in one debate, that nobody can produce the evidence in a 1 hour debate for the whole lineage of 2 billion years of evolution.
Yeah.
And I'd have to do some reading up, but I'd offer the same thing.
It's such a big question. This is one of the reasons why a lot of people will say, they're not going to debate evolution. I think it's Nephilim Free keeps going on about debating evolution, because we end up in any conversation like that with him getting into polystrate trees and the geological column and all the rest of it. And when you start to bring in all of that, and you've also got evolutionary evidence to talk about, you can't do that. Because and then gets brought up the speed of light and radioactive decay rates having changed in the past. And so you're going from physics to chemistry to biology, back to physics and to geology. And so you're having a debate about evolution with someone who basically gish gallops, gets you nowhere fast, and you have to narrow it down. And this is why you can't just you can't give a simple answer.
Yeah, but it's just a matter of understanding layers of abstraction. Like when you're learning to multiply, you first learn that multiplication is just shorthand for addition. That
yes,
2 times 2 means 2 plus 2, and 3 times 2 means 2 plus 2 plus 2. And at some point you're going to get to 6,528 times 8,432.
Yeah.
You're going to add those two numbers, but you're not going to add them by adding. You're going to multiply them, but you're not going to multiply them by adding.
So
yes,
the issue is,
if the person doesn't accept that there is a link between multiplication and addition, then what? If they completely and utterly refuse that, point blank, no, there's no link, then what?
And you can only demonstrate it on the simple examples and wait until the realization comes that it can be transferred to the more complex examples as well.
The problem is that there are times where the realization doesn't come. And then you've got problems. Where do you go from there? How many years are you willing to spend explaining to someone that there's a relationship between multiplication and addition? How many years on that one thing?
So from my end, I'm willing to spend a lot, because I want to figure out how to educate people like him, how to get them to realize stuff like that. Because it's a waste of time for a proper teacher. Like a proper teacher in a regular institution has responsibility to his students and has a responsibility to teach people who are willing to learn, who have already decided in their mind that, yes, I don't know, and I will learn what I'm being taught, and I will do it in the most efficient way that's available. And the teacher in a formal institution kind of has to respect everybody and not waste his time on I'm sorry about cutting out.
Okay.
So not waste his time on people who are unwilling to learn. But on the other hand, we do have to figure out the problem of andragogy, of learning adult people who are uneducated, who do not know how to use science to better their lives and everybody's lives, because those people vote. Those people decide. Those people are involved in politics, in civics, in religion, right? And there is a problem of how to solve that mishap. And I think G-Man is a fairly good experiment in that area, at least for this group.
Yeah, but what if the person doesn't want to learn? What if their entire being depends on there being no relationship at all between addition and multiplication?
That's exactly the problem. I'm looking to find a way, if it's possible, to solve it. Because if we can persuade them, if we can motivate them, if we can get to educate them, we can make the world a better place, literally.
Yes,
directly.
But if he's only involved, if you have someone who's only involved in the conversations to win, because I mean, yes, I know nobody wins a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
But that is the approach that is taken, and so they are not there. They don't want to learn anything. They want to win the conversation. Yeah. They want to convince you that there is no link between addition and multiplication, and no matter how hard you try.
Yeah, but in order to try to convince you, they have to. Sorry, I'm interrupting again.
They are not going to accept it, and so where do you go from there?
So they're trying to persuade you. In order to persuade you, they have to interact with you. Well, I can speak for myself, right? They're going to try to persuade me. In order to persuade me, they have to interact with me. If in that interaction, I can find a way to teach them something, a little bit, I have won. And
Yes.
I am perfectly willing to be persuaded by them. I'm perfectly willing to accept their definitions. I'm perfectly willing to accept their arguments and look at them as though they're perfectly serious scientific proposals in order to achieve that.
Yeah. I think when it comes to teaching those who are willing to learn, it's a completely different kettle of fish to attempting to inform someone who is hell-bent on not learning.
The issue is that those same people are denying climate change. And are,
I know.
Yeah. So waiting for them to be willing to learn, waiting for them to learn the vocabulary of science so that we can even communicate with them, as far as I'm concerned, is not an option.
Yes, yeah, what you say makes sense, but there does come a time, I think, where if you come across an individual like that, there does come a time where you have to cut your losses and say, I'm moving on to other people who do want to learn. Because there are people out there who do want to learn, and they want to learn more and move on and get you work up the levels. And if you are spending 3 years explaining why addition and multiplication are related, then those people who are willing to learn and have already grasped that will wander off in complete boredom and never have got any further.
Yeah, but the people who are willing to learn have access to better learning facilities. Somebody who is willing to learn can go on the internet and learn, and actually really learn, and can go to a teacher and say, teach me, right? I'm trying to reach the people who are not willing to learn. I'm trying to see if I'm trying to find what modus is required to persuade people.
Yeah. Well, I've been at this for 17 years now, and I haven't found the answer to that.
I know. And I'm not saying
I
there
haven't
is an
found
answer.
any way where you can teach those who are not just unwilling to learn, but hell-bent on not learning.
I know. And how many people have tried to solve gravity? And how many people have tried to solve the origins of species? And how many, right? Okay, so we'll all try, and all of us will fail, except for that one person who succeeds.
Yeah, I mean,
and when that person succeeds, then we'll learn from him and apply his knowledge.
Well, God knows we put a lot of man hours into the pursuit just in this community.
Yeah. It's very difficult though, because you have people who would like you to address certain things. But as I said, if you've gone on for 3 years on this one thing and you cannot get past it,
well, then we need to change what we're trying. If we're performing the same experiment in the same way, then according to Einstein, we're crazy. Right? So we need to try new things. We have tried demanding that they learn the definitions, and we have tried teaching them the definitions, and that didn't work. What I would like to propose is that we try to explain these things in their language, accept their definitions, because definitions are useless on their own, right?
is that doing any good? I mean, let's take the example I had this evening, where somebody's definition of morphology was that organisms morph into some other organism within their own lifetime, and that is evolution. Am I really doing them any favors by saying, okay, I'll accept your definition? Because the next time they go to read a paper that is talking about, say, the morphology of the wrist or the ankle, they are going to be left with the same complete misunderstanding of the paper. I haven't taught them anything. I've acquiesced to their ignorance. And you have, there is a fine line that you've got to walk. That you have to speak with them on their terms, but not to the extent that you allow them to then bastardize science and go along with it. So I can't acquiesce to that person's definition of morphology. Because if I do, and I say, okay, I'll accept your definition of morphology.
Well, for the purposes of this conversation, I'll accept it for the purposes of this conversation.
But if the conversation is about a paper on the morphology of the wrist joint, written by people who are not privy to this acquiescence to this other person's definition, how will they even understand the paper? How can you talk about the
I
paper?
understand, and yes, you cannot allow them to transfer their definition indefinitely to everything.
That is the point I'm making.
And I understand that point. And you can say morphology according to you, and morphology according to the paper's author, or morphology according to, and you can define. You can say it's a cucumber. It's green and it's squishy and it's been pickled. And we'll call it morphology for the purposes of this conversation. But yeah, I understand. If they're trying to use their definition to disprove a paper,
that's where
that's an issue. That's a problem.
And this is why, and also, if they want to talk about science, and they want to talk about scientific topics, and they want to talk about scientific papers, then they need to understand some of the language that is used. Now, we can simplify it when we are talking to them, but the papers can't simplify it for when they're reading it.
Yeah, but there is so much misuse about the term science inherent in not only them, but in the whole society overall. The question is, news, a scientific source, is so indicative of where the problem is.
Yeah,
right?
But, I mean, if you're talking about educating people, and if that has to start with the very basic definitions so that they can understand those papers that they want to read. Because without that, they can't read those papers and understand what the paper is about. But we're in a position to say, no, this is what is meant by this word within this field. So the next time you read a paper that uses that word, this is what it's referring to. Because that is the scientific definition. Then you've taught them something. You've taught them something.
Until you transfer the idea that... sorry, I interrupted. Really.
Well, I mean, you know yourself that science works on very strict definitions for clarity. We have the entire planet involved in scientific endeavour, and not everybody speaks English. And to make sure that there aren't misunderstandings, there are strict definitions of terms, and everybody sticks to them to stop the confusion.
Yeah, but that's within the scientific community. I'm not sure that that necessarily needs to apply to these people as well.
But it does if they want to read the scientific literature.
But the fact that they're reading scientific literature and interpreting scientific literature is completely insignificant because they don't know what science is. Because they
then shouldn't we be able to teach them that? Or do we just let them go along without knowing it? You see, you're saying you want to teach people things, but then you're saying, but we'll just go along with what they say.
No. I'm saying allow them to speak their mind. So
yeah, I agree with that.
I'm interpreting it in a way that, so he's been forced by social pressure to adopt certain scientific terms and the way he understands them. He has to use them because nobody will talk to him unless he uses them. But when he uses them wrong, nobody will talk to him, right? So he's in a position where he's forced to be willing to learn and to know the correct interpretation to even talk.
No, I think I think in a way it's like, you know, it's like trying to run before you can walk.
Yeah,
and you're saying,
yeah,
"Right, I'm running."
it is.
But if there's going to be a complete and utter miscommunication because you haven't clarified the terms, then any conversation will get nowhere fast.
Yeah,
now,
it will.
And that is why I think that allowing the use of their own definitions that they've made up in their heads doesn't do anybody any favours. It doesn't teach them anything. It just encourages them to stick with this wrong definition.
So my hypothesis is that it removes their preconceived rejection of your ideas. If you're not willing to talk to them and you're not willing to understand what they're saying, why should they be willing to talk to you? And why should they be willing to? Because if you don't know the jargon, then any jargon is equal. The correct and the wrong jargon are equally valid. And that's the position that all of them take. And so if you're not 100% certain, there's a chance that it might be true. And if I'm not 100% certain, there's a chance that what I'm saying might be true. So our things are equal. Yeah, but I'm 99.99% sure, and what you're saying is 0.01%. Like,
yeah, but if they're objecting to the jargon, then they shouldn't use it.
But they don't know that. How do you get them to recognize that and accept that without first talking to them? And
the only well, you're certainly not going to do it by acquiescing to their misuse of it. I said earlier on that we should attempt to de-jargonize what we say.
Absolutely.
Yes. But when they decide to use the jargon and misuse it, then what? We let them continue with their misuse of it, or we help them out.
Not indefinitely.
Do we help them out? Do we teach them? And if you want, as you say, you want to teach, then the answer has to be you teach them. You will teach them nothing. If you've got to teach first, you can't start and build before the walls are up.
So in today's conversations, G-Man was trying to get a piece of information. And he mislabeled the video and he misused the term. And ultimately, he did learn the meaning of a term. Maybe, hopefully, maybe not, because he was pushed so hard to fight against it that we may have reinforced his idea that we don't know what we're talking about. But he did not get an answer to his question. So, saying that Tiktaalik is a quadrupod and saying that there is a species called quadrupod and that there is a connection sets up a context in which a conversation is possible, in which you're not intellectually jeopardizing yourself, and in which you're answering his question as it is intended to be posed, in which he will get the information he's trying to get.
Yeah, but the whole point of his question was based on him not understanding what somebody had said about a tetrapod.
Yeah, I know.
Because he thought that by saying that humans are tetrapods, that was the same as saying that humans are descended from the first tetrapod. That's not the same thing. And so his problem was an understanding that there are extant species that are tetrapods. So when somebody says X is a tetrapod, they're not saying X is descended from the first tetrapod. Evolution has got nothing to do with it. It's classification. And his question was misunderstanding. So he was asking what else had actually said about the tetrapod. And so what do you do then? Because the only reason he was asking the question was because he had misunderstood what someone was saying to him. When he started that hangout, he thought that nobody has ever seen a tetrapod.
I know. And that's endearing to me.
Really, it is.
Yeah. Listen, I'm apparently becoming robotic, but I'm going to go anyway. So listen, I'm going to bid you guys good night.
Thank
Enjoy.
you.
All right, thank you for joining us, Fiona.
And
Thank you, Fiona,
good.
for wasting time and entertaining my ideas.
Yeah, well, listen, I wish you all the best in your attempts. 17 years has worn me out. Night, night.
Bye.
I've just been listening to the conversation, and evidently my college that I just graduated from, here's me talking about myself again, they didn't send my records to my new university, so yeah.
I mean, you're going to have to pay for them to do it again?
Oh, they can kiss my dick. They're going to send it like I told them to before I graduated, because there are some courses there that I took. I kind of don't want to take genetics over again, but looks like that's going to happen anyway. But I did take physics, and I'm not taking physics over again. So
that's good. I would have had to.
Oh man, because I went in there and I told them, like, yeah, I'm graduating. I kind of need you guys to send it. I filled out the fucking form. Like, where some shove it up their ass. Like, I don't. That bothers me when it's simple shit that doesn't get done, and now I have to spend time, and I'm supposed to be looking over this post-lab assignment and all this other bullshit. I have to spend time doing this. That bothers me.
Yeah, but my school still doesn't have my SAT scores. Because,
oh wow!
Yeah, because College Board has just been a dick and not sent it like at all.
I'm so glad I don't have to worry about SATs anymore. I get into school.
Truly.
Well, I don't really have much
to worry about it eventually with your son.
Oh, with him, yeah. Well, he's fucked. So I mean, he better learn how to deal with it himself. I was like, hey, I had to deal with it. So do you. Have fun. I'm going to be more supportive than that, maybe, possibly. But yeah,
depends on how you feel that day.
Yeah, it depends. The only test I really have to worry about is the GRE, but that's a little ways off. So. I'm just going to send it to this email so somebody will get it, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to get done with that. Yeah, it is I should have sent it to the registrar. Fuck, I sent it to the information office. I'm going to send it to them too. For the copy. Thank you. I think it's registrar. Somebody.
Just take out your anger by spamming it at people who might be able to solve your problem. That sounds like a good way to handle it.
Yeah, I think I'll do that. Help me with the GRE? Yeah, any help with the GRE is greatly appreciated. Now I'm just focused on chemistry for now, and it's more of, hey, I need to actually write down the hours to go and ask the TA. Well, I don't want to talk to TAs. Well, I would rather talk to the professor and verify a few things, but it's just me making time to do that.
Your professors have actual office hours? What is this?
They do. He didn't have them earlier this week because he wasn't feeling well, and I was like, well, just go play some StarCraft and get some 5-hour energy. But I can't say that in emails because that's unprofessional. I have to say it in person because people look at you the wrong way.
Or the right way, depending on what your intended reaction is.
Yeah. Oh no, I like to shock and awe most of my instructors. One of my instructors is Dr. Yi. And if you didn't guess by the name, he's Korean. So I when he entered the class. I couldn't remember which one to say, so I said 50-50, bitch, let's do it. And I said, Yubba say yo, and he just stopped and looked at me. Yubba say yo? I was like, yeah, Yubba say yo, yeah. So he's like, oh, you speak Korean? I was like, I speak a little bit of Hangul. He's like, oh, and he's like, oh, I think you mean Inyo say yo. I was like, oh, yeah, that was the other one. I'm like, fuck, that's 50-50. Crapped out on that, but yeah. So he was thoroughly impressed that I knew that, and I was like, well, my wife lived in Seoul for a while, and oh man, all the lights came on after that. So yeah. Yeah.
My dad lived in Seoul for a while, and that was a long time ago.
Okay, guys, I'll be signing off. It's been a pleasure hanging with you.
I'm going to end this.
Yeah, I'm basically going to need to go too.
Hold on. So thank you, folks. The debate's still on. It's supposed to be this Saturday, Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. ish. G-Man is going to contact Shanaraki. We have Hannah Zubby as a backup just in case. It'll be on G-Man's channel. Go subscribe to GTV if you want to watch it. There is supposed to be a second debate on my channel. We'll see how this one goes. But
I wouldn't hold your breath.
I'm not going to hold my breath whatsoever. I'm not. If I'm pretty sure he's going to end up being pissed. Like I'm just to be fair, because he makes all these predictions about something bad's going to happen to him every time he takes a chance. Give out the link. I'm probably going to get sniped and all this. Like, just stop it. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah, that's the mark of a confident person.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, okay. So since he does that, I'm going to go. He's going to become upset that he didn't do as well as he thought, and he's going to block me because it's my fault, and do another tantrum, not tantrum, and I can't make fun of him for saying that because I think I said explanatives, and it was supposed to be expletives. So yeah, but yeah, I think he's going to get pissed off because he didn't do as well, or someone moderated him when he was supposed to interrupt me and it was supposed to happen, or something will happen. He'll get pissed off and block me like he always does, and then pretends like he doesn't know why I can't come in his hangouts or comment on his channel on any of my main accounts. And so, yeah, I think that's going to happen, and there probably won't be a second debate. So, yes, this Saturday, 2 days from now.
Oh, fun.
So. Wait, Drag, I need to ask you a question. Well, you can if you come up with asked. I'm gonna ask you a few questions afterwards after you're in the hospital. But you can. Yeah, axes aren't really that great of weapons, but this is my opinion.
Well, at this point, Ocean would start reeing pretty hard. I'm pretty sure.
Oh god, Ocean's gonna take one to the head. So
I was up at like 3:30 in the morning in a hangout with Ocean like a couple of days ago, just talking to him about like bladed weapons. It was weird.
He has, I don't want to say it's an obsession, but it's an obsession with certain things. That being one. Let's see if you can find out another one. Well, I haven't. Well, you have him on Facebook, so you could probably figure out what some of the other ones were.
Did you see when I made that GIF of his profile picture? Please tell me you've seen that.
No, I didn't.
Oh my god, we need to stay on air for this. Hold on. I need to find this.
Okay, we'll stay on air for a little bit until, and I'll show that, and then we'll go off air.
Oh man, it's only going to take a second to put it up because I know exactly where it is. So, media files. That's... Oh god, it's so good. He said he was going to make it his actual profile picture because he loved it so much.
Still waiting for Hannah Zubby to make my new dragon icon, and I've been waiting on that for like 8 months now.
Yeah. Well, here it is. I dropped that in the middle of General Han Solo hangout where he was sitting in there with I think it was King Crocoduck, and I just come in silently and I have that.
He's like, that's the best thing ever.
He was like, email this to me immediately.
That's hilarious.
What do I do in this community?
Shit
Why am I
post.
here?
There's just shit posting. Oh no, I played. I went to your channel earlier today because my wife just found out who Brett Keane is because she watched the Shanny video. So I've tried to inform her about Brett Keane. I said, you know what? Let me just go to Pew's channel. And so I played the Billy Keane. And so she's like, what's with the situation? Why does he keep saying that? Played another video, and she's like, oh my god, he really does keep saying it. I was like, yeah, he does. Yes, you noticed.
God, I can't believe that someone was recently red pilled on Brett Keane, and I wasn't there to witness it.
She couldn't, like, it's one of those things when you first find out about Brett Keane, it's like, why does this creature exist? Because someone keeps feeding it. That's why. It's fucking macaroni.
In his case, it's the state that keeps feeding him. But
oh god,
let's not talk about that too much.
Oh, okay. Last question, Dragnet. Do you think G-Man will be posting vids of him lifting 15-pound curls in front of rain barrels and prep for the debate? He might. I mean, he was pointing some BB gun at the camera last time, and I'm not sure what that was about. I honestly didn't even watch the fucking video, not all of it. So you might what? Like you might see him do anything. He might be doing jumping jack. I don't fucking know. Like I don't get the point of that. Maybe he can just kind of tell me, well, I was just being funny. Okay, I got that. Like it's a done deal. But if he was trying to, like he likes to say, I was using psychology, I'm like, G-Man, I'd be genuinely surprised, man, if you could spell that word. I should not say that, but that's the first thing that I think, and I'm just like, that just let me leave it alone. Just leave it alone. It's fine. Okay, just accept it. Don't even ask questions. Just add. Look, the key word today, the word of the night, folks, is acquiesce. Just fucking acquiesce. Just whatever. Just fuck it. All right.
Now, is that an aqueous solution with or without salts?
Fuck you. Good night.